Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Top Deck Heroes. I'm just here because I was going to play some Octagon, and now I can't find a new to play an Octagon with. And I figured I would do a deck tech on my Felicia deck that I won the Atlanta PTC with, so that I can test out the stream archiving features that we got enabled and give it a live test run with some content that people might actually care about. Um, I can dream. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. This is my Felicia deck that I played at the last two PTCs and enjoyed greatly and got second and first place at them. Uh, it's 66 cards to get the elephant in the room, so to speak, out of the way. And I've been very impressed by just playing with Octagon today at how nice of a view it gives you for your cards. There's also this A to Z feature, which will actually pile them all up for you. It's pretty great, actually. For some people don't like Octagon. I think if you get to know it, it's actually it's got some good features. It's designed by uh, you know it's got competent coders who implemented what they saw, and maybe they didn't get all the way to something you'd actually really enjoy. But it's good if you put in the time to learn it. Um, Anyway, so you know, I think everyone knows Felicia at this point. Uh, she's a character that I think there are a lot of ways to build her. She has a lot of power. She doesn't ask you a whole lot of questions. She just tells you, play some of my cards, play some kicks, play some punches, play some slams, and you'll get paid off. And if you don't, well, you can also just play any old attack, and it'll always go to your momentum. And you'll be able to build up resources that way. Uh, So this deck is focused a lot more on kicks than some of the others might be, and also the powerful keyword, because I like kicks, I like powerful. They've been two of my favorite things throughout time, and also just they're quite good in this deck. I'm going to start with foundations though. Go to those a little later. One of the big features of this deck is it plays. It has the ability to play extremely conservatively on its build turns. Um, I play eight cards that I classify as zero diff spams. So Dragon Kyukun, which doesn't count to progressive. If it's your first card of the turn, you just get it out for free. It doesn't cost you anything at all. Then I have one Agile, which is high block, and then three copies of Push the Limit without the art, because, Octagon. And this card's deceptively incredible for this deck in particular. The deck, I wouldn't say you're wrong to say this deck is built around Push the Limit and trying to maximize its effect on the game. And I actually had the previous iteration. I wasn't playing Black Justice because I thought, well, it doesn't work with Push the Limit. But actually, every piece of Foundation Denial in this deck really works together and meshes together. Um, Skipping ahead to Black Justice here. When you reveal this card, your opponent destroys one ready Foundation. So my concern was that if I give them a bunch of face downs, well, I'll just make them sacrifice their face downs. And, well, that's not even that bad when that happens. And also, when your opponent has face downs and they need to pass control checks, they usually tap the face downs first. So often Black Justice can still pick off an important defensive piece they left ready. And these cards are, it's deceptively painful to play against. I hadn't realized just the extent to which getting your board picked apart and having to choose which of your babies would die first, how unpleasant that was. But yeah, 4 push the limits is an absolutely huge boon for the Felicia deck, which was already quite good prior to Indians. But so, yeah, this deck has an ability to play very conservatively if it wants to on its build turns. I only have a pair of 2 checks in the main deck right now. 2 copies of Dancing Flash with a third in the sideboard, and they pretty much never come out, and I often just ignore them anyway. The zero diffs also have an important purpose when you're using Summer Heat, and I will get into the especially fun parts of that later. And on top of those, I also have several one difficulty spams. I guess there are 10 more of them here. I play. Did I build this right? Actually, let me double check my list online because I believed I played at least one copy of Girl Like Any Other in this build. So I've got to pull that back up real quick. Deck building. So yeah, the air symbol is absolutely flooded with great options for one difficulty cards. So especially that have an important purpose of speed reduce. So this, among my zero diffs, there's the ability to play the card Forgotten, which offers -2 speed. Adds a zero difficulty, which is quite similar to Traveling Performer, which says your next control check to play it, a block gets +2, which is really the exact same thing as +2 speed, or sorry, -2 speed, only with the exception that a few things don't interact with Traveling Performer, where they do interact with actual speed reduce. So it looks like I did not play any Girl Like Any Others, or either that or um, the deck lists that Piglet posted online were incorrect, but I'm pretty sure they're correct. He did double check. He checked me in person, and I believe in him. This 66 card sounds correct for what I registered. So I guess I wasn't playing any Girl Like Any Others. But then Champion Watai is another absolutely incredible speed reduce card. I only played 2 copies because a lot of the time you don't need more than that, and it also is vulnerable to a lot of things like Damnation or Revoke out of the decks you really need against, so it's not entirely reliable. One of the big things with Felicia also is that with this particular deck is you have Bridging the Races and Summer Heat, which ready themselves, as well as this huge suite of spam cards and the ability to just build a whole lot of foundations very quickly. And then you don't really need -2 speed. You don't need a card that effectively counts for 2 for your control checks when you just have plenty of foundations already anyway. So that's an important feature. Bridging the Races is one of my favorite cards in this deck. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy playing it so much. It gives you a lot of flexibility and just a lot of power. The times where you'll lead off with an attack and Bridging the Races for +1 just makes you feel so clever that you correctly deduce that you're pushing in 1 extra damage, or your opponent couldn't pass the check because the extra 1 speed, and then playing around how to maximize the use of the once per turn response to ready it is pretty enjoyable to me. So yeah, I won't linger on that too much. Getting into the 2 diffs, Everyone knows Summer Heat. It's a great card. Just like Push the Limit, you could argue that this deck is built around maximizing Summer Heat because I find that it's a really useful way to build decks is to take a guess. Say, well, what's the best card in the format? And I think a lot of people these days would answer Summer Heat. And then let me actually double check my stream right now to make sure this is. Well, that looks good. All right, yeah, it's cutting off a little bit, but I think that's acceptable. I can live with it. I hope you all, everyone out there watching this, can live with that too. So take a card that's you guess the best card, and say, well, how can I build around that the most? And so in this deck, I play Delta Kick and Dancing Flash, which allow me to reuse Summer Heat, pick it back up, then replay it to draw an extra card. And I also play Felicity House to make that play even better. But I'll talk about that when I scroll down a little further. So yeah, the air symbol has it had a wealth of options for 1 difficulty cards. It has an absolute wealth of options on 2 difficulty cards. I'm only playing, this is 7. These are secret histories here. That makes 9, and then 13 total with 2 copies of this unique feral. It was quite difficult to select these because there are so many great cards. Secret History, I felt like, just really nerfs a lot of. It just kind of breaks the rules on what you can expect in the game of UFS. Having your character committed during a reversal is just really devastating to a lot of strategies. I remember in Rochester, the last PTC prior to Atlanta that I attended, I reversed a Ryu deck in the finals, and he played like 7 attacks that turn, and they were all printed 3 damage, and so I just got to take them all in the face, and it didn't matter at all. A lot of decks are built around their characters, and even the decks that aren't, you're still stun wanting them, committing an important resource out of their staging area, and it gives you, it's just a very, very powerful effect to have available to you. Perfect Accuracy obviously is a great card, just as an answer to anything that might slip through your piles of ever hopeful activations, and pushing the limit and Black Justice, and as well an important thing to note is the block situation was a big challenge in this deck. So I'm playing 2 copies of Feral in part because, well, when I draw both of them, even though it is unique and I'm tight on room, it's one of the best high blocks that's available to me. Um, and especially if we're worried about decks that are packing cards like Rain Flush or just trying to overload the high zone. We're playing 4 Push Limits, 2 Champions of Muay Thai, Black Justice, Secret History, and Ophidiophobia. Those are all low blocks, which are completely useless against those kind of cards. And it's kind of a concern when you're going to draw through your deck a whole bunch with Summer Heat and Templar, uh, what you'll draw into off of those. So it's important to keep your ratios in mind, even when you can plan ahead. So I'm kind of jumping around here. And yeah, I didn't actually chart out exactly what I was going to say about this in advance, but well, I hope you can still take some meaning out of it. Ophidiophobia, I feel like many of these cards don't really need introduction, don't need commentary. We play 3 Ever Hopeful because it is unique, so there are situations where you don't, where the second one won't do very much, but you want to draw it. You want to draw it often. You do have the ability to make some use of duplicate copies by feeding them to Delta Kick, which is a play that comes up fairly often, actually, I found. And also, just people sometimes fight over your Ever Hopeful, and there are a few things more devastating than charting out for your opponent to chart out in their mind. Well, okay, I'm going to take out their Ever Hopeful, and then I'm going to be able to have free reign with my staging area because that's taken away from them, and then you just block and drop 1 down anyway. I included 2 Black Justice in this deck because it's a 0-cost Stone Rain. It's a very powerful effect, or it's a very. I mean, you get it at no cost. You just have to draw it and then not play it, and then not throw away an attack or something during your next during your next review step. And I'm a huge fan of the review step, so well, it was somewhat of a cost, I guess. But in addition, I was also really excited about using the response on this card to draw 2 cards after I activate the powerful effect, or pay the powerful cost rather, pay the cost of a powerful ability, to be completely precise. Draw up to 2 cards, and I have something like 6 powerful attacks in this deck between Delta Kick and Rolling Uppercut, and some of them Delta Kick can't even be Kopoke and Draining to stop that. But that actually never came up. To my great sadness, I was really excited about doing that. I did play one of these in my staging area, but I wound up needing to play around getting decked in that game. And I also have one copy of Prototype in this deck. When I played in Rochester, I was actually playing a copy of Familiar Faces in this slot because I wanted to cancel action cards like Dodge and Self-Destruct. But I kind of reflected on that before this PTC and realized that the entire rest of this deck has a very powerful, very focused, proactive game plan, and including a 3 difficulty card that I would sometimes fail the control check for by checking a 2 on turn 1, or I would have to play it after an attack string or whatever, and all it would do is just kind of give me some insurance against my opponent's draws. I just felt like it wasn't worth quite as much as having this kind of extremely powerful damage pump that can really close out a game, and it's especially powerful, similar to Secret History, during a reversal where your opponent has to commit a whole lot more, or has to put their resources into doing it before you'll get to untap on your subsequent turn, and also just in any kind of late game scenario where your opponent, you might be trading resources with your opponent and trying to sneak attacks through, and then it just gives you much more range to finish things off with even a small attack when they're at a relatively high life total. So getting into the attack lineup I chose, I feel like I see a lot of Felicia decks that are just built in a way that they'll struggle really badly to ever kill a deck like Clark, or ever kill any kind of 5-hand size, 30 plus vitality deck that plays a lot of defensive abilities, and I tried to keep that in mind when I was constructing this deck. So I play a full playset of Ryujin Kyaku, Robert's Big Kick, that once you've landed some pokes, once the game's dragged down for a little while and they haven't defeated your momentum, this basically has printed 5 damage and takes out 2 defensive resources, so it can be worth much more damage. It single-handedly makes Kopogen Training a very important card for your opponent. and when otherwise it does stuff. It's -3 speed if I have 2 momentum because it can take the kick keyword away from something, but it becomes extremely important for them to save it for this card because otherwise they just get their board ran over. Um, I also play a full play set of Delta Kicks, which have powerful too. It allows me to convert the resources built up from a poke turn, getting in 5 damage here, 5 damage there, and convert that into extra damage. It's not rare to have a Delta Kick with 3 or 4 momentum piled into its powerful rating. And similarly, Rolling Uppercut. If you have 2 copies of Rolling Uppercut, it's like the first one does 5 damage because you can dump the additional momentum you get from the power up ability into it, and also gives you this, it's a good poke that scales to the late game, which is really pretty much the dream. This card plays somewhat similarly to a lot of cards like Strength of Tail or Reactive Style do into some other decks, because Felicia, you can just play it whenever the hell she wants, make you potentially deal with blocking it at a high speed off zone, to be able to reversal it or whatever you may want to do, but she's going to get a momentum from it, and it turns a card on a build turn into a momentum, or it can also do plenty of great stuff in the late game. And then obviously I play 2 copies of Nevos, which is the poster child of both a lot of air decks and kind of cashing in on an incremental advantage you've built up. So when you're ever hopefully your opponent over the course of the whole game, keep their staging area is dwindling around, let's say 6 foundations for 2/3 of the game, while you build and get 20 foundations in play, and hopefully they don't have Armor Expert because Armor Expert is quite good against that kind of thing. Nevos lets you turn all those spare foundations you have sitting around and turn them into just damage directly to your opponent's face. And I see a lot of people not playing Dancing Flash in their Felicia decks, and this card is just absurdly good. It's extremely flexible. It's extremely high powered. This is really disjointed. I apologize for that. But yeah, the attack lineup it's a work in progress still, but I think it's really important to focus on having a game plan to be able to defeat people who have a lot of vitality. Really, I feel like these are just kind of Region Kyaku. You often don't even combo it. Even just the threat of the combo does a lot, but you really want to be able to draw into these in long games. And also, a very important part to note about it is the +0 mid block, which is a very, very important resource, especially because you really do want to cheat on your speed reduce if you can, just to not have your deck clogged down with low impact cards. You'd rather have cards that work even if your opponent isn't attacking you, or work even if you're attacking your opponent. I think that's very valuable in this kind of deck to make the most out of the slots you are given, because you only have 60 cards. You only have like 60 something cards. Ultimately, you only draw 7 cards out of your deck, and the better each of those cards can be, the better your chance of winning the game. So there are one of the kind of weird things in this deck is that I only play 5 reversals, but yet I play. I've just rambled on about how important each of the slots are, and how Secret History earns those slots despite being by far at its best on reversals. I just felt like the possibility of that kind of defensive nut draw was worth that kind of risk. These cards are really, really good in Felicia, both Little Kick and Nevos. You can just play them as forms; they're completely acceptable in that way. When you just draw your hand, it's like, oh, I've got 2 of these and some other crap I don't really want to play right now. Maybe I want to hold on to enough smash for later. You can just poke them with this, force them to deal with a 4 speed high for 4 damage. It's completely fine to just get a momentum out of that way. But then, with Felicia's ability on when you're defending yourself, it actually it gives you the possibility to make a 5 difficulty check to then make your next check 1 less difficult on the balance. And so that lets you spread out some of that risk. If you check a 3 on this, you can just kind of casually fail it, and no harm, no foul if you're going to be constricted on control checks rather on the number of blocks available. Then it doesn't matter that you failed the card, because you need to be blocking with +0 mids or +1 mids or Templars and whatever. But then if you do succeed it, then your next check is incrementally easier. Plus you are going to get Breaker 1 and drawing a card. landing these kind of hits, especially in a matchup. Like I credit some of my success in the Felicia mirror to hitting them with the Shibukiyaku reversals, and just getting ahead on resources that way. Reversals are really good anytime you reversal and your opponent stops building or just stops attacking you after that, you've gotten a huge advantage in that game. I feel like. One thing, if you do want to optimize this deck for the Felicia mirror, I highly recommend is the card Catspike. I only played 2 copies because I was worried about playing too many low blocks more than anything else. But I did lose 2 games in each of the matches I played in the Felicia mirror to my opponents hitting me with Catspikes on turn 2. I say plural Catspikes. They hit me with 2 Catspikes and dropped down Ever Hopeful at the same time. And just the interaction with this Ever Hopeful is almost like having Piercing Howl again, because it's a 3-speed high attack that then gives you an entire momentum's worth of value immediately when you drop that Ever Hopeful down, and it's really tough to come back from that kind of getting knocked back by that much in that kind of game. I mentioned earlier about Summer Heat and the card Delta Kick or Dancing Flash, and I feel like this is one of the most important interactions that really sort of push Felicia over the top in my head. But let me finish the deck list first. I'm gonna I've got Octagon fired up, so I'm just going to move the cards around the table and actually show you. Just finally on the attack lineup, I also played one of Sagaki Offering. I felt like there are games where you'll just get 9 damage out of it and get to draw a card. A similar option is playing Tiger Kick as just an attack that draws a card, which may have been a better option. It's hard to say. I liked the off zone and the higher damage output. Like, it's another Ryujin Kyaku sized card if they're blocking with a +3 mid at any point. Well, +3 mid that isn't agile or ever hopeful or otherwise clearing itself from the card pool. And I also like mid attacks really suck in standard right now. There's Ryujin Kyakus, there's Templars, there's Team K dashes, there's all kinds of great mid blocks, and I feel like Tiger Kick suffers in that environment a lot. Even though as Felicia, attacking is always really good. I think that's one of the really cool things about her is that in a format full of reversals and special blocks, you still just want to jam attacks, a large fraction of the time. Just one Delta Kick and suddenly your ability is going to be turned on. You have all these powerful cards. You have all these other momentum costs like Dancing Flash multiple, Dancing Flash firsty, and Ever Hopeful's response, which is like Dancing Flash. So yeah, Sagaki Offering just lets you get a little bit of incremental advantage while you're poking your opponent, and also kind of a turn where you go, let's say you lead off with Delta Kick, they block it, then you Cat Spike them, and then you get +2 to your attack. So maybe you could play an Ever Hopeful now, but then if you check a 5, it's like you actually checked a 7, so it's kind of a waste. Sagaki Offering lets you put that to its best use. I've got 3 Templars in this deck and 1 Dodge. I feel like that's I generally play fewer of these cards than a lot of people because I hate having my hand clogged up with dead cards. I like having a lot of options to choose from, and so if I play 4 Templars and I draw a hand with 3 Templars, I just feel like an idiot, and I will refuse to have them as fast as I can. But they're an important defensive piece. They're very frustrating to play against in the right draws. Some people play a lot more dodges than me, but I feel like this card does the best work when people are just afraid of it, and playing 1 still puts the fear of God into people, puts the fear of dodge into people, I suppose, while still having the defensive utility in the right draws, the right circumstances. You can often find it when you need it. And also, I hate getting my hand clogged with these cards. I'd much rather have a push the limit in play than have an extra foundation or an extra attack going on than have double dodges at the right time. And so, before I get to the last card, which if you look carefully at your screen is Felicity House, I just want to talk about Sweet Baby Challenge. I think this card's really, really good in Felicia, and it's especially, this is the asset version of a similar effect, which is Strength of Tail, which I'm not playing any copies of. Just as basically, these are cards which put themselves in your momentum for, whenever you need them, and I felt like those are the most important things to have when your opponents are playing cards like How Heat and Kyaku, or Plum Eater or any other kind of momentum hate. And I wish I could pull these up, but I didn't prepare those. Um, Cards like Death Row as well. Anything that destroys your entire momentum in one fell swoop, regardless of how much you have. I'm only playing 2 copies because I really just didn't think very many people were going to show up with Howheat and Kyaku, and that was a very accurate guess on the format. I believe there were actually 0 in top 8, and I didn't see anyone even playing those symbols. Or, well, I guess I did. Actually, I played against my teammate Piglet. I almost called him. His name is Clark now. By the way, if you didn't know. Um, no, his name's actually still Piglet. But I played against him playing a good deck, but he wasn't. He was very far away from playing Howie and Kyaku Destroy Momentum. And so it was kind of an ambitious choice, but I think it paid off clearly. So I was only playing Delta Kick and Sweepy Challenge as ways to get quote fast momentum unquote. I was really relying on being able to just hit them with rolling uppercuts or whatever on build turns, or what would later be, or what would keep people guessing, I guess. I think this card's really valuable as well. I choose to play this over Strength of Tail. I think the block is clearly a little better once I'm already in the situation of feeling like I have too many low blocks in the deck. It's got Breaker 1 as well, and then also this puts you up a card, so you put it in play on your build turn, and then a subsequent turn you get 1 resource from adding to momentum, and then another resource from adding the foundation you check to your hand, as well as the card selection of finding a Secret History and Ophid in the right matchup, or it's just Summer Heat or a Bridging the Races or a Push the Limit in every matchup, because these are the bread and butter kind of just resource advantage tools you use to get ahead in a game. And this deck is really all about the incremental resource advantage game. So finally, Felicity House. So pretty much everything about this card does good work in this deck, starting with the high block. So this is actually just about the best high block available that isn't on exactly Nivose on the air symbol. And so you could ask, why am I not playing more Nivoses? And I wouldn't really have a good answer. There could definitely just be more of this card. I felt like I want to attack early and often, and just jamming just a 5 difficulty first form Nivose actually isn't really even that bad, but I just felt like it wasn't quite going to generate quite as much of an advantage as I wanted it to. And this card's obviously really at its best when you're cleaning up. When you're playing at the end of an attack string and your opponent's exhausted the resources blocking your Delta Kicks and your Dancing Flashes, your Ryujin Kyakus, and then you just play Nivose and stack it up to lethal damage. I didn't feel like that was going to happen that often, so I only wanted to play 2. I wanted to focus more on being proactive, playing attacks that had high base speeds, and being able to get Felicia online on them as fast as possible at 7 speeds, where they're starting to become unblockable. But so anyway, back to Felicity House. +2 high block is unusually good, and I think in a lot of matchups. So crucially, it's got a +2 high block in matchups where you have to deal with Spinning Necro Driver, which is kind of the terror of all assets in Standard right now, especially against Dimitri. High blocks are extremely important because his attack strings tend to start with the Darkside Master. You really want to block that Darkside Master, and then you really need to block either the second Darkside Master, which will be at 9 damage, or the Necro Driver multiple that'll be at 9 damage, or whatever horrible things are going to be coming down the line. Curse Splats, Zings, Shiranui no Mais, who knows. Death Blow, multiple Death Blow attacks sometimes, if they're doing that kind of thing. So the high block's really important. And it's two copies of Unique. You want to be able to block with it. That's great. And then the response commit. Similarly, once you even just get this in play, now suddenly you have all your reversals have high blocks. You can block with those, or you can block with a +0 mid, or +1 mid, or +2 mid sometimes. And so the response commit is basically just adding an extra card to your hand, and lets you kind of build with Reckless Abandon on some turns. It does cost momentum to do so sometimes you want to be careful about turning off Felicia's +3 speed due to having 2 momentum, but it's usually not too much of a concern once you're at that kind of late stage of the game where you're concerned about no cards in your hand. And finally, the real reason this card is in the deck is for exactly this sequence here. I'm going to drag some cards onto the table and drag this one to my hand. And bring this one in my hand. Just drag some random foundations. Let's say it's turn 2, and I had, actually it's kind of unusual. So I had a pretty typical turn 1 build. Close this and shuffle. I should have pulled my character out. Alright, close and shuffle. So spread these out. Yeah, you can try to spread these out. Let's say like my turn 1 had been 0 difficulty, Dragon Kyokugen, Felicity House, Ophidiaphobia, Traveling Performer, and Push the Limit, which is, if I'm going second, I'm almost certain to pass all of these. If I check 1, 2, I can commit Felicia. If I check both 2s, well, I'll be sad and I guess probably fail Push the Limit, unless I'm like the absolute worst possible luck, in which case I still have a reasonable 2 build plus an asset. And so now for my turn 2, I'm going to say it's going to draw 5 cards. I will also comment that I feel like not a lot of people necessarily realize you're not required to play Summer Heat on every turn where you draw one, especially turn 1 or turn 2 or when you're playing a lot of attacks. You do not need to play Summer Heat. You can just hold it in your hand and have an excellent turn the next turn, the following turn. Actually, you can't see my hand here, but I dragged a copy of Dancing Flash and a copy of Summer Heat. You can't see it when I highlight them down at the bottom of the screen. Right now I've got a lot of attacks, so I'm actually just gonna kind of move these back into the deck. Shuffle a little bit. Alright, so now I've got... So anyway, the reason that Felicity House is in this deck is so you can play a Summer Heat, check for it, draw a card, and I just actually drew into a Dragon Kyokugen, which is absolutely perfect. So I've got Dragon, 2 copies of Traveling Performer, a Delta Kick, a Region Kyaku, a Hinship Kyaku, and a Dancing Flash. And now you can respond with this Felicity House, pull this down to your staging area, and then play an attack like Delta Kick. Oh, and I checked a 4 here, which is absolutely perfect for this demonstration. So then you commit Summer Heat to pass. Maybe you have to commit 2. Who cares? You give the attack powerful too, but the paying of the cost of that is to bounce the Summer Heat. So even if they revoke, they can't stop this. Then you do your Felicia stuff. Maybe you add an attack to momentum. Let's add the Dancing Flash because it's turn 2. We don't need that yet. Then you replay Summer Heat. You get to draw another card, so you're not drawing 2 cards off the same Summer Heat. Playing this out of order is something I do all the time. It's a terrible play. And then you just build out all these foundations you have to go with, and now you're just, an extra mile ahead thanks to your doubled up Summer Heat draws. And this is the kind of game where you've just gotten so much advantage over your opponent, it's going to be tough for them to come back. They have to have something special to be able to stop you just from... I'm taking the wrong buttons here. Alright, let's untap that. Now, next turn, you've got... In this case, I have a plus... no, I don't even. So, I've already got 2 more kicks in my hand ready to go to combo this on them to convert on my giant resource advantage. Or I can just, as things stand, I can just go play this, plus 6 speed, plus 3 more speed, combo, and if it hits, we both lose 4 life, and it's going to be pretty hard to stop this from killing you, along with the other attacks I draw, the check boost from Felicia, all that good stuff. So that's really what I was hoping to get done with Summer Heat, but then I put in this, or with Felicity House, was blocking high, and then even abusing Summer Heat even harder. So I'm going to reset the game. And there's one more thing I guess to talk about with this Felicia deck, which I could have done before resetting the game, which is my sideboard. Let's see if I can pull this up. Alright, this came out perfectly. So I'm playing 2 more copies, the remaining 2 copies of Ophidiaphobia in here. It's pretty straightforward. These come in for throw decks, where the Dancing Flash plus Delta Kick kind of recursion engine is even more important. Well, it's not even an engine; just the recursion plays is even more important. You can really kind of lock them out of the game by just recurring these copies, the copies of Photophobia you do draw into. Reusing them, you can block like, well, I suppose you could block somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 throws over the course of the game, plus however much you can draw after your cycle. So it's quite nice. There's an additional copy of Dodge, which similarly also both these cards cover up against anyone playing the new cards like Direct Hit or What Lies Ahead. And so if someone wants to, get cute and try to use Throw It Down or another very high impact if this attack deals damage kind of trigger, Ophidiaphobia and Dodge are both very effective at shutting that down. There's a third Dancing Flash here, which very often comes in whenever you go first or whenever you're in a very close matchup and you just want a bit of extra power at a bit of extra risk. It comes against every throw deck because you want to just maximize how many Ophidiphobias you can get going. Another new card in here is High Seas Adventure, which it's hard to declare a single MVP of the weekend, especially when it's a 3 difficulty no block that when you draw it and play it, it's already kind of unusually good. I mean, you expect it to have a high impact on the game because you put it in your deck, and you also didn't get unlucky and didn't fail to check for it. But this was one of the best tools I had against my finals opponent in Bomb Man, because this effectively cancels an end cells out of that deck, which is based around basically any kind of high impact enhances. Trinity Geyser is another good example of an attack that just gets complete shutdown out of this. And I credit my my win against Phil Birch in the Felicia mirror to using this card on a Cat Spike, which prevented him from using Felicia's speed enhance on it, prevented him from using its own ability, so that when he played a Ever Hopeful as his next form, he still had to pay a momentum to pull it down, which mattered quite a lot in that situation. And because of those things, I was able to block with my own Ever Hopeful, pull my own Ever Hopeful down, and then clutch out a very close, very tight Felicia mirror. Which, of course, I only got into that situation because he checked a lot of 2s earlier in the game still, and managed to fail his turn 2 almost completely. He played 3 attacks, and I didn't even block very much because it was turn 2. And he still failed out. He still failed to. I don't think he came out with any additional foundations at the end of it. But the other card in here, which does not have the air symbol, it's important to note. So I'm not gonna ramble on about how great the high block is to have, or how important high blocks are. It's Polar Warp. So I included this card to try to patch up one of the biggest weaknesses of this deck, which is the Fire or Evil Dragonflare Natalie deck. And so this card cancels Self-Destruct, and it cancels Natalie's Pennant Guard's form, while also getting to draw a card on top of that for free, which was the primary thing I had in mind. And additionally, there are more assets with form abilities which do not even destroy themselves the way Pennant Guard does. Specifically, Drew Maffei Lion Buddy gets shut down by Polar Warp, shut down and destroyed, and I get to draw a card whenever a Polar Orb goes off on that. So I did not, fortunately, because I don't think it's a good matchup even with these crazy Polar Orbs in the sideboard, I did not get paired up against any self-destruct decks on the weekend. In the tournament anyway, I played against Stein on, Thursday afternoon, I think, and he rolled the crap out of me in some exciting games. But I did side this in against Church's Ask Athena deck, and with the intention of canceling some Dream of Fate Lion Buddy activations, and that didn't really pan out. But I did have the chance to snipe a extensive wardrobe he was playing the form on to set up for his Psycho Medley later that turn. And awkwardly, he had the option to card-handed it, but he did not realize that until he had already put his card in the discard pile, and because he had already put his card in the discard pile, I had already drawn my card. So there was a bit of a miscommunication there. So I don't know if Polar Warp is the way. I'm pretty confident that Polar Warp is not the best way to go against Natalie, because one of my opponents late in the tournament, Phil Birch, was playing Felicia and had an even better idea on how to spend a whole bunch of sideboard slots to patch up a bad matchup, which was he included 4 copies of Battle Fist and a copy of Runica in his sideboard. And Runica's Battle Fists really do quite a number on Natalie. She doesn't get to keep her penning card on the table anymore, and then the damage pump can really kind of run over her relatively underdeveloped defenses as a 6-hand size, really highly aggressively leaning character. So I don't know. Specifically, I can't remember if he told me or not if he actually faced that matchup on the weekend and used it to win. But he did try out the sideboard plan again in our matchup when he was going second, which I don't know if it necessarily was the best idea, specifically in the Felicia matchup, because the lack of getting free +3 speeds on his stuff is a pretty big detriment, and also Runica doesn't have the water symbol for his dancing flashes, which are a pretty important card in that mirror. They have, I mean, they're just a very high impact card with a relatively low cost for Felicia. Um, but yeah, the Runica Battle Fist plan seems pretty amazing at covering up Natalie because she just, 27 damage, 27 vitality is so much more, while also getting set back a whole. Never getting to activate your Natalia panic guards. So that's about all I've got on Felicia. This is my sideboard. I rambled on extensively about the main deck. This went for 45 minutes or so I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching, anyone who happens to watch this. And tune in on Wednesday nights for our regularly scheduled time with myself and Sean O'Brien on Top Deck Heroes.